Okay, hello and welcome to another video. So in this one, we're going to show you how to make a Windows pod that mounts the host file system, and we're going to read and write to an existing file on the host, as well as show you how to just write any kind of new file to the host if you don't need existing access for something. So yeah, let's see. First thing you need is access to some kind of Kubernetes cluster that has a Windows node on it. And here is one way to do that. We can use AKS Engine, which is a script basically that you give it a bunch of parameters and then it goes to Azure and it creates a Kubernetes cluster in Azure for you. So like here it is in Azure. It's got the scale sets, the virtual machines, like the networking, all that. It's done through this script here. And then this file is to specify like what you want your cluster to look like. So I've only said, give it right here one Windows pool, node pool, give it a public IP, and then like here are the credentials, user, password. You should probably change that if you want to keep this like in production. But this is just a test one. And like if you want to SSH to the master node, yeah, you can do that too. You can provide some key data here. So anyways, let's go check it out. So like once we've deployed this, I won't actually do it again because it's created for me, but once you've execute this script, you will get some output that says, succeeded deploying. And then you can go to Azure and you can actually see it here. So the next thing we're going to do is RDP to the host, Windows host, and make a file, just any text file, so that we can show that our pod reads and writes to that file. So first we go to the scale set and instances. We have just the one, and then this IP we can use now to remote into that machine. I already have it. Okay, yeah. And then the password, like I said, is here. Let's go to the code actually. The password is just this pretty generic password here. Okay, so let's see. We can now connect to that machine. Yeah, so here we are into this machine. If we look in here, there's basically nothing, just the usual. So, alright, next is we RDP. So I showed you that. Alright, now let's make a file. So we're just going to use Notepad. So Notepad host file.txt, and it says, do you want to create a new file? Yes. And I'm just going to type hello from the host and new line. Yeah. So now if we look in this directory, we see this new this new file, and if we look in it, we just have that simple message. Alright, so the next thing, with normal Windows pods, you don't actually get write access, and usually you don't get read access to existing files. So there's a new Windows pod called host process, this guy, host process. That is it gives you the permissions to read and write to the host, like out of the box. So I'm going to make a post about that soon. But for now, what we have to do is basically go to the host and give a certain permission to that directory. So this command here, ICACLs is a tool to give and revoke permissions. We're going to do it onto the Azure user directory. We're going to grant this username built-in /users. That's the group which your pod will be a part of when it's deployed. OI and the CI basically say, for any new files created in this directory, keep these permissions. And then the permission part is actually the F. So that's full access. And /t is recursive. So if we execute that, we're going to go see like the list of files it's touched. And one of them is host file. So we've now applied the correct permissions. Okay, so we need to deploy our pod. So the pod that we're going to deploy, let me look at this code here. It's just going to read a file specified. That's the first command line argument, and it will write to the file specified as the second command line argument. And then this YAML here, pretty simple. It's just one pod. Container name is window pod file mount. The image is publicly available. You could do this on any machine. And then the name of the file we want to read from is hostfile.txt. And you may notice that the path I gave is hostfile mount, which if you look in our RDP, the path here is, well, you see the path, users Azure user. So that's interesting because here we're going to give it hostfile mount. The reason is when you mount a pod, you basically specify what the pod sees as the path. So I want to say the pod sees host file mount. And then here in the volume section, host file mount, the actual host path is /users Azure user. Alright, so let's deploy this pod here. Sorry, one second. Okay, so this command will deploy the pod, right? Alright, so then we can go get the logs for the pod. So we see that it received this file to read from, this file to write to, and we could print the contents of the file before we wrote. So if we go to the RDP session, if you look back up here, the message used to only be hello from the host, right? There used to be just the hello from the host. But now if we type this out again, we're going to see two lines now. Hello from the host, hello from the container. So the reason we could do this is because of this mounting. Let me grab it. Sorry, here. Yeah, this mount here, this host path mount. And caveat was we had to apply the right permissions because that's just how Windows does it with normal pods. But there is this new thing called host process pods. I'll have a post out soon about that. Okay, cool. So yeah, we verified on the host that it actually changed. And another thing we could do is make a new directory from the pod. So say you don't need to access an existing directory or an existing file, you can specify on the Windows pod, basically create a new directory and write to this directory. And that works fine. Like you don't need to do any permissions set up at all for that. That works out of the box. So let's do that just to show you. So I'm going to delete this old pod real quick. Yep, deleted. And the new pod we're going to deploy is this one, underscore alternative. So if you notice here, the path is /new/host/directory. And the type is directory or create, whereas it used to just be directory. So what this will do is creates this directory if it doesn't exist, and then when we write to this file, it'll be a brand new file because it's totally new. Since here, if we like look in the C drive, is there that new directory? Whoops. No, we don't see new anywhere here. So let's apply this real quick. Alternative. And let's see what happens. So the first thing we'll notice in the logs is that the reading failed. Because why is that? Well, we didn't have anything in that directory. It's brand new, right? So that's expected. So like what else did we see? Well, we should see that it wrote to this host file.txt. And we should see that it's in this new path here, new host directory. So let's go check that out. So if we go to, let's look in here. Now we see this directory, new. So let's look in that. What's in here? Okay, awesome. Host directory. So now if we look in this, it's brand new, made it just barely. We see a file there, we type it out. What do we see? We see hello from the container. And that sticks around like even when you delete. So I'm going to delete this. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, so I'm going to delete this pod. Sorry, just go to. So even when we delete the pod, and we can look at the pods, make sure, yeah, none of this. This still lives, so we can type it out again. It's still there. So that's one way you can write to the host if you don't need to be alternating, like, or I guess I should say, changing up an existing file, an existing directory. You could just mount it that way, or you could say directory or create. So, yeah, thanks for watching. All the code is here in the GitHub. The article is linked in the description below. Appreciate your time. Have a great day.